My name is Emma Clark, and I'm 42 years old. For 15 years, I built a life I thought was unshakable, a life with my husband, Ethan Clark, who was my rock, my partner, my everything. Or so I believed. It was a Thursday evening, one of those quiet nights where nothing seemed unusual. I was sitting at the kitchen counter with a mug of tea, scrolling through my phone while Ethan paced in the living room. He had been acting strangely for weeks, short answers, late nights, and a complete lack of interest in anything I said. "Emma, can we talk?" His voice was serious, almost rehearsed. I looked up, frowning. "Sure. What's on your mind?" He didn't sit down. Instead, he stood there, arms crossed, like he was preparing for a confrontation. "I've been thinking about this for a long time. I think we need to end this, our marriage." My heart skipped a beat. "Excuse me. I want a divorce," he said flatly, like he was asking for the salt at dinner. I blinked, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. "You can't be serious." "I am, Emma," he said, his voice growing impatient. "We're not the same people anymore. This marriage isn't working." I felt a wave of anger rise in my chest. "Not working? Ethan, we've been together for 15 years. You don't just wake up and decide this is over." He avoided my gaze, looking everywhere but at me. "It's not sudden. I've been unhappy for a long time. And," he hesitated before dropping the bombshell, "I've met someone else." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Someone else?" I whispered. "Yes," he admitted, almost smugly. "It's Ava. Your friend." Ava. My best friend, the woman who'd been in my life for over a decade. The woman who came to our anniversary dinners, confided in me about her struggles, and drank wine on my couch while we watched terrible rom-coms. I clenched my fists, my voice cold and sharp. "How long?" He had the audacity to shrug. "Does it matter? She makes me happy, Emma. She's everything you used to be." There it was. The cruel dagger he wanted to twist. "And what exactly do you mean by that?" He didn't hold back. "You've let yourself go. You're too focused on your whatever you do all day. Ava appreciates me, Emma. She's fun, she's vibrant, and..." Enough. My voice cut through his tirade, startling him. "Get out of my house." He smirked, like he was winning some imaginary game. "You'll hear from my lawyer soon." And with that, he walked out, leaving me alone in the silence of our now empty home. I didn't cry. Not that night. Instead, I poured myself another cup of tea, sat back down, and opened my laptop. Ethan had no idea who he was walking away from. He didn't know about the empire I'd quietly built, the millions I earned every month, or the connections I'd made while he was too busy ignoring me. He thought he was leaving behind an old, boring wife. What he didn't realize was that he had just set the stage for his own downfall. The day after Ethan walked out, I woke up to a quiet house. The bed felt emptier, the air colder, but instead of wallowing, I slipped into my routine. My life wasn't just a marriage, it was a meticulously built empire, one that Ethan had never cared to understand. As I sipped my coffee, I opened my laptop to check on the numbers for my company, Clark Consulting, an international branding and marketing firm I'd built from scratch. Most people didn't know about it, not even my closest friends. To the outside world, I was just a homemaker dabbling in freelance work. Ethan never asked questions about the hours I spent on calls or the frequent trips to visit friends. He simply didn't care enough. The dashboard loaded, and there it was, another $1.2 million in revenue this month. The money wasn't what mattered, though. It was the freedom it gave me, the proof that I was more than a housewife. That morning, as I prepared to face the world, my phone buzzed with a message from Ava. The audacity of her name lighting up my screen made me laugh bitterly. "Emma, I hope we can talk soon. I know this is hard, but I didn't want you to find out like this." I stared at the screen, feeling a mixture of anger and pity. Ava had always been envious of my home, my stability, and now, apparently, my husband. But she had no idea what she'd signed up for. I decided it was time to act. I called my assistant, Maya, a sharp 29-year-old who managed everything from my schedule to my secret investments. "Maya," I said as she answered. "I want a full report on Ethan's financials and Ava's background. Every detail." "Yes, ma'am," she replied without hesitation. "And the press release for the new acquisition?" "Hold off for now. I have a feeling the timing will be perfect soon." Later that afternoon, I received the report. As I suspected, Ethan was drowning in debt. His reckless spending on luxury cars and failed business ventures had drained his savings. Ava, meanwhile, had a history of gold-digging relationships, each ending with her walking away richer while her partner was left in shambles. I smiled. They deserved each other. That evening, as I sat by the fire with a glass of wine, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Ethan. I didn't answer. Instead, I let it ring and ring until he finally gave up. He had no idea I was busy plotting the next chapter of my life, a chapter where he wouldn't even be a footnote. The next day, I met with James Porter, a charismatic 38-year-old venture capitalist who had been a key player in helping me grow my company. We'd always had a professional relationship, but there was something about his warm smile and genuine interest in my success that felt different now. "Emma," he said as we sipped coffee in a sleek downtown cafe, "I heard about Ethan. Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay," I said with a smirk. "I think this is exactly the push I needed." His eyebrows raised in curiosity. "What are you planning?" I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Let's just say I'm about to make some big moves, personally and professionally. And I'd love your help." James smiled, a glint of admiration in his eyes. "Count me in." By the end of the week, my plan was in motion. Ethan and Ava would soon realize they'd underestimated me. While they played petty games, I was playing chess. What they didn't know was that the house Ethan was so eager to leave. It wasn't his, it was mine, paid for in full years ago. The joint bank account he drained to impress Ava. Already replenished with funds he'd never touch again. As I looked out at the city skyline from my office, I felt something I hadn't in years: freedom. Ethan thought he was starting a new chapter. What he didn't realize was that I was about to rewrite the whole story. The days following Ethan's departure were a whirlwind. The house was quieter now, and I found comfort in that. I no longer had to walk on eggshells, wondering if I'd say something wrong or disappoint him. But as the quiet settled in, something more exhilarating began to take shape. I wasn't just moving on, I was gearing up for something far bigger than I had ever imagined. It wasn't long before Ethan reached out again. This time, his message was different. "Emma, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I've been thinking about everything, about us. Can we talk?" I could feel his desperation through the text, and part of me was tempted to reply, to let him grovel a bit more. But I held back. No. This was no longer about winning him back. It was about reclaiming everything he thought I had lost. So instead of answering him directly, I forwarded his message to Maya, who'd been working tirelessly behind the scenes to monitor Ethan's every move. Maya was quick, and within hours, I had the full scoop. Ethan and Ava were already fighting. Their perfect little world was crumbling faster than I had anticipated. Ava had been caught in a string of lies about their finances, lies that Ethan was furious about. She had promised him a lavish life, but her spending habits were quickly draining his bank account. What Ethan didn't realize was that this was the beginning of a much larger collapse. I smiled. The timing was perfect. That evening, I arranged a meeting with Ethan. I knew he was desperate enough to agree, but I also knew this would be my moment to truly put everything into play. We met at a quiet restaurant on the outskirts of town, somewhere neutral. I had already planned for James to be there, though Ethan wouldn't know that. When he walked in, Ethan looked disheveled, worn out, but still trying to maintain that air of arrogance. He sat down across from me, not meeting my gaze. "I've been thinking," he began, "and I realize now that I screwed up. I shouldn't have left you like that. You were always there for me. I was just—" "Let's skip the apologies, Ethan," I interrupted, not in the mood for his excuses. "You left. You made your choice. Now, you have to live with it." He flinched, but I could see the glimmer of hope in his eyes. He wasn't ready to accept the truth. "I want to fix things, Emma," he said, his voice lowering. "I've realized Ava isn't who I thought she was. I want to come home. We can start over. Just give me a chance." I leaned back, studying him. This was what he wanted. He wanted me to beg him for forgiveness, to let him back in. But I had already moved past that. "Ethan, I'm not the woman you left behind. I've changed, but not in the way you think. I've built something. I've built everything without you, and I don't need you anymore." I could see the realization hit him like a freight train. His eyes widened, and he stood frozen, unsure of how to respond. You're different," he stammered. "What do you mean by that?" I gave him a small, knowing smile. "What I mean is, I've been running my own company for years now. Clark Consulting, my company. You never asked about it, did you? You just assumed I was the same person who cared about appearances. But I'm not. I earn more in a single month than you've ever made in your entire life. And guess what? I don't need you to survive." His face drained of color. He opened his mouth, but the words wouldn't come. Before he could collect himself, James slid into the booth beside me, offering Ethan a firm handshake and a warm smile. "I'm James Porter. I've been helping Emma with her latest business ventures. We're working on some exciting opportunities." Ethan's jaw dropped. You're working with him?" His voice quivered in disbelief. "Yes, I am," I replied, my tone cool and calm. "And as you can see, things are going quite well for me. I don't need your apology or your forgiveness. But here's what you should know, Ethan, this is my life now, and you're no longer part of it." Ethan sat there, a man completely shattered. His pride, once so unshakable, was now crushed. He could no longer hide behind his charm and arrogance. Ava's lies were catching up to him, and here I was, sitting across from a man who truly respected me, who saw me for who I had become. Ethan's eyes flicked from me to James, a storm of jealousy and regret behind them. "You don't have to do this, Emma," he pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. "We can fix everything. We can work things out." I shook my head. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. I saw him for who he truly was, a man too blinded by his own ego to ever appreciate what he had. "No, Ethan. You've made your choice. You left. You chose Ava. Now you have to face the consequences of that." Standing up, I felt no anger, only empowerment. The old Emma, the one who bent over backward to please everyone and tolerated Ethan's selfishness, was gone. As I walked out of the restaurant with James by my side, something became crystal clear. Ethan had thought he was walking away from me, but in truth, I was walking away from him, into a future where I was in control. Ethan's downfall was swift. Ava, trying desperately to salvage what little was left, continued to drain his finances, but no amount of extravagant purchases could hide the cracks in their relationship. Watching from the sidelines, I realized just how much I had underestimated myself. Ethan had relied on me, on my stability. Now, all he had was regret. Weeks passed, and my business continued to grow. New partnerships were forming, and exciting opportunities lay on the horizon. James and I worked closely together, and I was grateful for someone who respected me, someone who saw my worth long before I ever did. As expected, Ava's true nature began to emerge. She reached out to me several times, trying to explain herself, but I didn't bother responding. Instead, I sent a simple message to both her and Ethan. I hope you're both happy with your choices. Just remember, you don't always get to control who walks away. I could almost feel the sting as they read those words. Their attempts to regain control had failed. Ethan, now alone, continued to reach out, but each message became more desperate. It wasn't enough anymore. One evening, Maya called me with excitement in her voice. "Emma, you made the front page today. Everyone's talking about your acquisition of Clark Consulting's biggest rival. You're about to break records. You're in the driver's seat." I leaned back in my chair, smiling. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of pride that didn't rely on anyone else's approval. Standing on the balcony of my sleek new office, looking out over the city, I realized just how far I had come. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. All because I had decided to bet on myself. I was no longer the woman defined by the man I once loved. I was Emma Clark, successful, confident, and free. A few weeks later, I received one final message from Ethan. "I've made a mess of everything. I can't undo the past, but I want you to know I regret everything. If you can find it in your heart to forgive me." I didn't respond. Not out of bitterness, but because the only person I needed to forgive was myself. As I closed my phone and turned back to my life, one thing was clear: I had finally learned to put myself first. And that, more than anything, was the greatest victory of all.